So friends, Donald Trump's lawyers just can't stop getting indicted. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, two more of Donald Trump's lawyers, Boris Epshteyn and Jenna Ellis, just walked into a courtroom in Arizona and pleaded not guilty to the 9 felony charges on which they've been indicted for, in substance, trying to help Donald Trump steal the 2020 election. Here is some of the new reporting. This from NBC News. Headline, evidence is strong. Trump legal advisors Jenna Ellis, Boris Epshteyn plead not guilty in Arizona case. Jenna Ellis and Boris Epshteyn are among 18 co-defendants that pleaded not guilty in the Arizona 2020 fake electors case. Epshteyn and Ellis kind of sounds like the worst law firm ever, doesn't it? But Epshteyn and Ellis now join all of the other co-defendants, co-conspirators, their criminal associates in the Arizona fake elector case. You know, ne'er-do-wells like Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, and others, 18 defendants in all. So friends, let's unpack this legal development a little bit, and then let's look forward to what's about to happen to Donald Trump and many of his co-conspirators, co-defendants, criminal associates across Donald Trump's several criminal cases. What does the legal front hold in store? But I want to start with a question that I have heard posed several times over the past 24 hours, and it involves Donald Trump's co-defendant, Jenna Ellis. People have asked, well, why is it that Jenna Ellis just pleaded not guilty in Arizona when she pleaded guilty as one of the RICO co-defendants down in Georgia? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but it actually does, and here's why. Jenna Ellis just walked into court together with Boris Epshteyn and some of the others, pleaded not guilty in their first court hearing, their arraignment hearing, when they're formally notified of the charges that have been indicted against them. Everybody, virtually everybody, pleads not guilty at their arraignment hearing. Why? Well, they're first being told what the charges are that they've been indicted on. They don't have the discovery yet. They don't have the evidence. They don't know what the prosecutors have. So nobody walks in and pleads guilty at their first court hearing, their arraignment, because they're just being told formally what the charges are that they've been indicted for. So just as in Georgia, Jenna Ellis walked into court down there for her arraignment hearing and pleaded not guilty, and then she changed her plea to guilty and entered a plea of guilty and agreed to cooperate against Donald Trump and her fellow co-conspirators in the Georgia case. And it looks like Jenna Ellis is now going through that same process in Arizona. So if I had to bet on whether Jenna Ellis will change her plea in Arizona, just as she did in Georgia, you've probably heard me say before, friends, that I am not a gambling man. I am not a high roller. $1 is my betting limit. You know, I'd probably put 90 cents of my max $1 bet on Jenna Ellis changing her plea from not guilty to guilty in Arizona, just as she did down in Georgia. But now let's sort of pull back to the 30,000-foot level, and let's talk about some of what is about to happen on the legal front to Trump and a number of his criminal associates. We are waiting for the Supreme Court to make its decision on whether Donald Trump is a king, is a dictator, has absolute immunity against prosecution, and can commit all of the crimes he wants in violation of our federal laws against the American people, including crimes to unlawfully, unconstitutionally retain the power of the presidency after he loses a presidential election. Yes, that is the Supreme Court opinion we are waiting for and we expect to get any day now. And we're going to be talking a lot about it as soon as that Supreme Court opinion is handed down. But here is why I want to talk a little bit about the legal front moving forward. Because in Donald Trump's federal prosecution in Washington, D.C., for trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, there are 6 unindicted co-conspirators in that case. Donald Trump is the only indicted defendant in the D.C. federal prosecution, but there are 6 unindicted co-conspirators. Who are they? Well, let's get to know the 6 likely co-conspirators in Trump's January 6th indictment. This from the Democracy Docket website. Former President Donald Trump's most recent indictment includes 6 unnamed co-conspirators who were, quote, enlisted to assist him in his criminal efforts to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election and retain power, close quote. Based on the details provided in the indictment, the co-conspirators listed as attorneys are presumed to be 1. Rudy Giuliani, 2. John Eastman, 3. Sidney Powell, 4. Jeffrey Clark, and 5. Kenneth Chesbro. The 6th is more speculative than the others, but details in the indictment suggest it may be political operative Boris Epshteyn. So friends, can I just add a quick footnote here? Really feels like more of a PSA, a public service announcement. DemocracyDocket.com is the site for election attorney Mark Elias's group. Mark, as you may know, oversaw the state-by-state legal response to the lawsuits that were filed by Donald Trump's dirty lawyers attacking the results of the 2020 presidential election. And Mark and his team defeated Trump and his lawyers at every turn. Mark Elias and his team members are true democracy warriors. And if you're interested in supporting their remarkable democracy-saving efforts, you can go to democracydocket.com. I'll put a link to Mark's website in the description of this video. Now, let's talk about what happens once the Supreme Court finally decides the absolute immunity issue, which we expect to happen any day now. The end of the Supreme Court term is June 30th, and we are all expecting they will decide it by June 30th. I mean, what's the rush? Let's just leave it to the last minute. It's not like democracy is hanging in the balance or anything. So here are really the 3 likely outcomes of that Supreme Court litigation. 1, they rule consistent with the Constitution that a president is not above the law, is not a king, is not a dictator, and does not have absolute immunity against prosecution. That would be the result if they decided to apply the express language of the Constitution, the rule of law. But do I expect the Supreme Court, at least the block of 6, to be honest brokers of the law and the Constitution? Sadly, I don't. I'm hopeful that maybe they'll, kind of pull it together at the last minute, but I'm not optimistic. But 1, they could rule in accordance with the Constitution that a president does not have immunity against prosecution, return the case to Judge Tanya Chutkan, and let her get the case to trial, which she could still do before the November election. 2, they could say a president does have complete immunity against prosecution and can commit all the crimes he wants against the people of the United States and can never be prosecuted for it. in a very real sense, that will be the Supreme Court converting America from a democracy to a dictatorship or perhaps a monarchy. And I don't think they will go that far. But here is the third option, and I think it is the leading candidate in my mind. They could return the case to Judge Tanya Chutkan, the presiding judge in D.C., and say, we want you to hold all kinds of hearings, take all the time you need, what's the rush, and decide whether each and every act alleged in the indictment of Donald Trump, whether each act should enjoy some kind of immunity, maybe, outer perimeter immunity, which is a thing in the civil law, but not a thing in the criminal law. The Supreme Court might make it up out of whole cloth to benefit Donald Trump. And they may return it with directions to hold all kinds of hearings, make all kinds of findings, and then they will direct Judge Chutkan to return the case to them for further proceedings in the Supreme Court. That will effectively push the trial, beyond the November presidential election. And that will be the Supreme Court handing Donald Trump an enormous win, at least in form and perhaps even in substance. Sadly, I think that is the most likely outcome. But here's why I go through this, because we've got these 6 unindicted co-conspirators in Donald Trump's federal case in D.C. One of them, there's some cross-pollination here, is Boris Epshteyn, the evidence tends to suggest. Now, let's be clear. The 6 unindicted co-conspirators, if you read Donald Trump's federal indictment in D.C., they're not named, but their conduct is described in substance. So that is how, as we just read from the Democracy Docket website, that's how we've been able to glean who these 6 co-conspirators likely are, and one seems to be Boris Epshteyn. Here is the good news. Let's look for that silver lining that is often lurking but behind the big orange dark cloud that is Donald Trump. I think the reason Special Counsel Jack Smith indicted only Donald Trump and left these other 6 as unindicted co-conspirators was because he was trying to bring a case that was built for speed, that he could get to trial before the November election, so the American voters would know when they went to the polls whether they're voting for a convicted felon or somebody who's been completely exonerated by a jury of his peers, found not guilty of all charges. Not likely, but I think that's why Jack Smith opted only to indict Donald Trump and leave the other 6, and perhaps others, but at least those other 6 as unindicted co-conspirators. But if the Supreme Court hands down a decision, as I am expecting them to, that will effectively kick Donald Trump's trial until after the November election, keep your eyes out for this, friends. That will give Jack Smith free rein to indict those 6, thus far, unindicted co-conspirators, because there will no longer be a risk of bogging the case down procedurally, if the Supreme Court, in essence, kind of puts a nail in the coffin of a timely trial before the election. And here's the thing, and I have said this over and over again, friends, ever since the Trump indictment dropped a year ago now, there's no way on God's green earth that Jack Smith would have put everyone on notice by issuing that Trump criminal indictment, that here are 6 individuals who were Donald Trump's co-conspirators, his criminal associates, his partners in crime. There's no way he would have put that in the indictment if he intended not to indict those 6 co-conspirators, those 6 criminal associates of Donald Trump who tried to help him steal the 2020 election. They were unindicted co-conspirators for procedural reasons. In Jack Smith's hope that he could get the case to trial promptly, he may not now be able to do that. So keep an eye out for more federal indictments to drop against those 6 co-conspirators in the event the Supreme Court bogs everything down regarding the possibility of a timely trial of Donald Trump. Jack Smith's playing the long game, friends. Yes, it feels like justice is taking forever. But then sometimes it comes all at once, and we're here for the all at once part. Because justice matters. Please hang in there, friends. And as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.